Hi there everyone, we're going to go over questions 4.4, 4.5 and 4.6 of the recent rivers assessment in this video. Okay, so let's share my screen and we will get started. Okay, right, so in previous videos I went over the two questions of 4.1 and 4.2 which we've seen here, and it ended by looking at the difference between the long profile and the cross profile of a river, and you're given this figure in the exam. Now, the question we're starting with is this one here, which is suggest, so provide some ideas why the cross profile of the river valley changes between points A and B. Now, A and B are here on this diagram. So we've got A, which is around about probably 11, actually no, it's just on 10 line, isn't it? 10 kilometers from the source, so it's going into the middle course of the river. And this point here, which is approximately 32.5 kilometers from the source, which is over here. So we need to tell the examiner why the cross profile of the river valley changes as it goes from this part of the river, the middle course, towards the lower course. Now, let's just pause there with that exam question. Let's just think about the theory behind this. Now, in the exam, you are most likely going to experience a question where you need to describe the cross profile of the river valley or the river channel. Okay, now these are two completely different things. The river valley refers to the land around the river. Okay, so let's have a look at the upper course. The river valley in the upper course is very steep and it is very narrow. Okay, so the distance from my cursor here and my cursor here wouldn't be as large as it would be perhaps in the middle course photograph. Okay, so the valley is steep and narrow. Okay, the river channel refers to the cross section of the river. So if you were to get into this river, you'd be thinking about, well, how wide is this river from one riverbank to the next? How deep is the river? What type of shape is it? Is it quite smooth on the riverbed? Is it deep, or are there lots of boulders creating friction for that water's flow? Okay, so in the upper course, the channel of the river is very narrow and it's also very shallow. You could also say it's very angular, meaning there's lots of large rocks which haven't yet been eroded in that area. Okay, the reason in the upper course that we have, the reason why we have a steep valley side, V-shaped valley, is because of vertical erosion within the river. So what is happening in the upper course, you have very large angular boulders rolling along the riverbed, which is what we refer to as traction, causing the riverbed to be eroded downwards vertically through abrasion. So you need to imagine these large angular boulders and rocks rolling along the riverbed, scouring it deeper and cutting into the landscape. Now, because of that, you have exposed river channel, riverbanks either side of the stream, which are weathered and eventually become loose, and then the material falls into the river in the upper course. It will then be transported downstream towards the lower course. And because of this continued vertical erosion, weathering of the sides of the valley, and then loosening and slumping of the material into the river, we are able to see quite a distinct V shape in the upper course like this. Okay. In the middle course, the river valley becomes wider. As you can see, the point between here and here would be greater than this point from here to here. And on the outermost reaches of the upper course of the river valley, you will have some gently sloping hillsides, as that river has started now to meander out of the mountainous regions towards and move towards the lower course. The lower course of river valley is far wider than in the upper course, and the middle course, and it is also very flat. So this is why we have many settlements originating in the lower course of river valleys. It's easy to build on. Settlements can be close to a coast so they can export and import goods. And the land here is often quite fertile, meaning the soil is very nutritious, making it easy to grow crops. And that's because of the constant from numerous floods year in, year out, which deposits all the nutritious sediment from the bottom of the river onto the sides of onto the floodplain. Okay, the channel in the lower course is much wider, it's much deeper, and all the material that has been moving down from the upper course to the middle course and then eventually end up in the lower course is quite small at this point, so it's not eroding the river vertically anymore, it's actually eroding it laterally. And this process of lateral erosion actually starts in the middle course when the river meanders through the valley, making it wider. Okay, by lateral erosion, I mean outwards. It's eroding sideways instead of downwards. Okay, so in the upper course, you've got the vertical erosion. The river valley is getting remaining that V shape, but here in the middle course, the river's meandering across that river valley, making it wider in this part here. Okay, so for this question, the reason why the cross profile of the river valley changes between A and B is because the valley sides become less steep because of the effects of weathering and mass movement. So this idea suggests that because the river valley, the sides of the river valley have been weathered over time, they've become less steep. The second answer, which you could have written, is that near the source, the river is cutting downwards, it's cutting vertically into the landscape, but further downstream, it's eroding laterally outwards. Okay, so the meandering river is eroding the river valley outwards. Bit of a complex idea. It's quite hard to visualize, so I've put a video link here to help you. Okay, next one. Question 4.5. So for this question, it's asking you to state one reason why the size of sediment carried by the river decreases downstream. Okay, so for this question, you need to tell the examiner why is it that the load of the river, the material that the river is carrying becomes smaller as it goes from source or upper course regions towards the lower course regions. So as you can see in the upper course in this photograph, there are large boulders within the river channel. There'll also be some smaller pebbles, some smaller rocks, which have also already become a little bit smaller over time. Now you might be thinking, well, where did these boulders come from? Well, it links back to this point here. When the sides of the river cliff, which are the banks of the river, when they were weathered and the material become loose and it slumped into the river, that has caused a build-up of material within the river. So these boulders here are from the valley sides, quite simply. Okay, now as these boulders and rocks roll along the riverbed, they're going to bump into each other. Okay, in doing so, they will chip fragments of rock away from each other, causing the pebbles and the rocks to become smaller as they travel from upstream to downstream, from the upper course to the lower course. So it's because they're continually banging each other, being pushed along by the river, the size of the sediment decreases. So the answer to this question is here. The reason the size of sediment carried by the river decreases downstream is because of attrition. That is where the river's load becomes smaller as rocks and pebbles bump into each other as they're transported downstream. Okay, so in the lower course, you'll see sediment like this, fine grains of sediment, which used to be part of larger rocks and boulders, but over time they've been chipped away. Okay. So I'm going to pause this video here. If you want to go on to this next question, you'll need to go to the playlist and find the link for 4.6. Okay.